Hello, everyone, and welcome to this lunchtime panel of Work, Earn, Learn, Can Apprenticeship Build an Inclusive and Skilled Sector? And as we are just heading ahead of a National Apprentice Week, which runs all week next week, today we are discussing apprenticeships for the creative and cultural sectors and what the future needs to look like for work, learn opportunities in our industries. Today's event is hosted by Creative and Cultural Skills, who are the cultural sector skill body with a focus on connecting, guiding, and representing colleagues from right across education, the creative industries, and the cultural organizations to see a fair and skilled sector in all four of our UK nations. My name is Dianna Djokey, and I am chairing today's panel. And I am a Black woman. I have a ponytail with braids. I am wearing a blue hoodie. My eyes are brown. I am in Portsmouth, and my backdrop is a horse. And so we are delighted to have so many people joining us. And before we get started, I just wanted to kick off with a few housekeeping things. We have a British Sign Language interpreter with us today, as well as providing captions. You can access these in your settings, and they will be included in the recording. In a minute, the panel will describe as well as introduce themselves. If you are experiencing any accessibility issues, please email communications@ccskills.org.uk. We've had some questions that you've already sent, which will be addressed throughout the discussion, but we will also be taking questions throughout. So please feel free to pop these in the Q&A box. And just to get started off, we thought we will get everyone's view on something straight away by using the poll button at the bottom of your screen. So the question is, are apprenticeships working right now for the creative and cultural sectors? And so I'll ask the question again, just to make sure everyone gets it. Are apprenticeships working right now for the creative and cultural sectors? And so if you see the question there, there's three options: yes, no, and don't know. So if you'd like to answer, let me know. What do you think? A simple yes or no poll to gauge opinions and to get us going. And we'll be asking what our panel thinks just a moment after we've done some more introductions. So, on to our panel. And so if everyone could come on screen. And so what we'll do is we'll go in order of everyone so they can introduce themselves. First, we'll start off with Nikki.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me. If you could let me know if you can't, that would be gorgeous. I don't know how you're going to do that. I'm Nikki Christie. I'm having a bit of problem with my IT this morning. It's slowing down. I'm one of the deputy directors at the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. Are you okay, Diana?
Yeah, I'm good. Is everything okay?
Yeah. No, I could see. Yeah, I think I've got a delay on my screen. One of the deputy directors at the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, and I lead on a number of routes for the Institute, including creative and design. I am a white woman. I have shortish brown bobbed hair. I've got glasses. I'm wearing glasses. They're big blue rimmed things. I've got green eyes. I've got a mustard top on. It's a cardigan with a bit of a collar. I'm Scottish. I have a background that's my institute's logo and description. And I, full disclosure, I am in a room with my dog beside me. And so any chewing or barking will be Lola, not me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nikki. Next, we will go to Arit.
You mean Arit?
Sorry, Arit.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, my name is Arit Eminue, and I'm a people and future talent specialist. And I ran an apprenticeship company that I founded and led for over 12 years called Diva Apprenticeships, and we focus purely on the entertainment industry. So that was primarily film, TV, and music, and supported hundreds of individuals into careers into large companies such as Viacom, CNN, Universal Music, Fremantle, Sony Music, and many other companies. I now do a lot of learning and development work with my clients. So that's everything from designing to delivering training, to helping them develop their apprenticeship programs, to coaching and recruitment, anything to do with people, the development of talent, and empowering individuals to take ownership of their careers is what I do. In terms of what I look like, so I am Black, I am wearing glasses, I have long hair today. I am sitting in a room that looks like it's my living room, but it's not. So if I lean back, I will disappear. People often think it's my living room, but I always feel compelled to let them know it is not. But there is a TV to my left and a sofa to my right. And I'm wearing a black hoodie, and I have no dog.
Thank you so much. The next person is Anthony.
Hi everyone, I'm Anthony. I am co-artistic director of company Chameleon. So we're a Manchester-based dance theatre company. We tour all over the world, making work for theatre, outdoors. We work in prisons, museums, galleries, libraries, in schools. We have a big and we have a building here with several studios and a little theatre. I have brown skin, dark hair with some grey at the sides. I'm wearing a mustard shirt and I'm sat in my office. You might hear some crazy music from time to time because the dancers are busy rehearsing just next door to me. So apologies for any sound spill.
Thank you so much. And lastly, Martha.
Hi, so I'm Martha Henley and I'm currently Deputy General Manager of Cheltenham Playhouse Theatre. However, previous to this, I was an apprentice myself. So it's really great to be here. In terms of a description, I'm white, I've got brown blonde hair, blue eyes, and I'm wearing a green jumper. I'm currently sat in my office in Malvern, Worcestershire.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. So with all that done, what we'll do now is we'll get into some questions for the panelists that we have. And if you guys have any questions who are watching today, please do use the Q&A box to ask those questions. And towards the end, I'll be able to ask those questions to the panel. But just to get us started, to kick off, the first question I have for the panel, and anyone's able to answer this, are apprentices for the creative and culture sector doing what they need to do? If so, please do let me know what that is. And if not, why not?
I'm happy to start that one. So having done an apprenticeship myself, personally, I would say yes, I think they are. I did do an events course before I took my apprenticeship in events management. However, not having the actual hands-on experience, I found it was really difficult to get into the industry in a workplace. So I took a few years out, and when I stumbled upon an apprenticeship for events, I was over the moon. I could do it in the place that I've lived, and actually I think it's amazing that actually that gave me a real insight into how I could get into the creative and cultural industry and all my different options, as well as learning with experience that I can take forward throughout my career. So in my opinion, yes, I think they are doing what they're supposed to. My only comment would be that I'd love to see more of them, especially living in Worcester. It's not a massive city, so there aren't huge amounts of creative cultural apprenticeships out there, but they are there, and I do think the ones that are doing what they should be.
Yeah, I think you make really great points, especially on the ideas of being able to be practical and getting that experience, which I think is really 100%. Important. But also you made a really great point about the geolocations and the accessibilities that these areas can have and further develop when it comes to apprentice, so they can get the experience that you've been able to have.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with doing something where you live, I think comes a great sense of pride as well. You really do feel really proud to be, for me as well, delivering events within a city that, you know, I've grown up and lived in for years.
Good, thank you so much. Would any of the other panelists like to answer the question? Anthony?
I'm going to say yes and no. So the yes for me is we've run a really successful program over 9 or 10 years, and everyone that's come through the program we've run is doing what they set out to do. They're working professionally and they're absolutely brilliant. The no, I'd say, is a lot of apprenticeship programs in dance kind of cycle around a touring company model linked to a qualification at the end. And where that equips people physically, gets them ready and produces some fantastic dancers, I think that some other skills that you really need to survive and that you will need to take into your future, like your understanding of grant writing, communication skills, leadership, networking, all around teaching, they're not part of that offer. And I think it still creates a big gap that needs to be filled. So I think there's work to do.
I completely agree with you there, and I can understand completely why you said yes or no. Would any of the other panelists, Nikki and Arit, like to give their thoughts?
I think my answer,
Let me go for it, Arit. I'll go back on mute.
I think the two answers really kind of have answered how I would answer that question. That doesn't make sense, but because it depends on who you ask the question to, right? So, and it depends on what their expectations are. So expectations vary depending on whether you're an apprentice, whether you're an employer, and then your expectations can vary from the size of from one small employer to a larger organization. And then you have sector skills councils such as CC Skills. They will have a different answer to that question because you have different needs and expectations. So I have lots of apprentices like Martha who have thoroughly enjoyed their apprenticeship. It's given them a foothold in an industry that they really struggled with. It's enabled them to learn, to earn. And, you know, just in December, I was celebrating the anniversary of one of our apprentices who'd been with the company she did her apprenticeship at for over 10 years. And another one who's just moved into management. She'd finished her team leader apprenticeship. She started doing business administration and she'd moved up. And I regularly get emails and, oh, I've moved into this higher role and I would never have done it were it not for you guys at Diva, all of that. So it matters, it makes a difference to them. Equally, I have small companies, especially micro businesses, which, you know, a lot of companies within the creative and cultural skills are micro businesses. So they have 1 to 5 employees. They've used apprenticeships to develop their business and to develop talent right from kind of new entrant through to now in management. So they would say, yes, they are working for me. Yet larger organizations who are paying into the levy, who want more flexibility on how they can use that levy, will say, actually, it's not really working for me because I don't have the flexibility. And then you might have sector skills councils who will say, well, the apprenticeship standards don't really work for our industry, or the delivery model is stopping a section of our industry from engaging because it's too restrictive. So I think the answer will depend on who you're talking to, because there isn't one linear expectation. Do you get what I mean? So it depends on where you're starting from and what you want to get out of the apprenticeship.
Thank you so much for making that point. From what you're saying, it seems, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's about a bespoke approach, really being able to take kind of case by case basis in a way.
It's a needs approach. Different. If you want, I'll use that term, stakeholders for want of a better, or people who are involved in apprenticeships. So from your training provider to your micro business, your small business, your large organization, they will have different needs. Your sector skills council will have a different need because they're looking at skills right across the industry, not just what we have, but also what's coming down the pipeline, where those gaps are, and how can we use the apprenticeship model to address them. So they will have a different expectation of what they want from Nikki in the Institute in developing standards. Do you see what I mean? So, and then training providers, you're at the coal face, you're trying to balance all of those different needs so that you're giving fair access, you're trying to be flexible to employers, and you're trying to be able to feed into the development of new standards, which ultimately is going to fall down to you to deliver. So there's lots of people in the mix that will have different expectations, and rarely are they all around the table at the same time.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for such a breakdown. Nikki, what are your thoughts?
I've rarely disagreed with Arit, and I'm not going to start today. And I'm kind of with what everyone's saying. So do they work? They work sometimes. They work, I think if you're lucky enough to get on an apprenticeship, if you're lucky enough to have a good and committed employer who understands apprenticeships, because you can be a good and committed employer, but not kind of understand the ask. If all these things line up, it's absolutely fantastic. There's no doubt that high quality products are valued by both apprentices and by employers. That's great. Where they're not working quite yet in the creative and cultural sector in particular, because it is different in many ways in its makeup and its numbers, and the nicheness, I think, of it is the way I would put it, is we're dealing with, we've got about 33 approved apprenticeship standards in this sector at the moment. And Arit touched on, obviously there's a wider range of standards that also can be applied to this sector. But in the terms of the creative and cultural standards, there's about 33. And I think 22 of them have either low or no starts. There's a bit of an issue there, and because that then leads on to who's going to offer to deliver training for them, who's going to offer to assess them, and can employers find a training provider in the area they need. So there's some good quality products out there. I think we need to increase awareness of the products and of how to access and use them, I think is where I am. So again, I'm going partially.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Great. So the next question we have is, how do apprenticeships improve diversity and fairness access? And do they?
Are you asking someone in particular, or is the expectation that we just jump in and talk, or
Yeah,
raise
you
our
just
hand?
need to talk. Yeah, it's a
Oh,
chat.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Please do.
I mean, I can start if you want, then, since I've opened up my mouth. I think from an apprentice perspective, right? They're free to access, right? So you don't pay for the training. You're able to do that training within your working hours. And I think there's a perception issue around apprenticeships. So a lot of it is about, oh, they're only for young people, whereas they're not. They're for anyone over the age of 16, so long as you've got the required time between the time you start your apprenticeship and the time you retire, you can do an apprenticeship, right? So I think when you think now more than ever before, we have to, it's really down to individuals to take ownership of the development of their careers. So I think apprenticeships are one way that you can do that, whether you're returning, to the work after a career break, you want to upskill, you want to change jobs, you can look at an apprenticeship to do that. I think so diversity in terms of access and social mobility, I think, can come into play. It's a different option for people who don't want to go to university. Or even if you do, you can do a degree apprenticeship, so you can save money on those university fees. So there's no cost to you, and more likely chance that you will have a job at the end, having you done your degree. And so I think there's lots of benefit for the individuals. I think for companies who want to diversify their workforce, you can do that through an apprenticeship as well as developing talent. So I think they can work for you in that way as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Anthony.
I guess we're quite unusual in the way things are structured. Actually, most of the apprentices that for dance that go through the system do pay, and they pay 7 to 8K a year. They get an MA at the end. For me, I mean, we stepped out of that a couple of years back because one thing we were seeing that most of the applicants, it was predominantly white middle-class females. It wasn't a diverse group coming in the first place. And also it bothered me for a long time that people would have to pay that amount of money to do it. So we've kind of designed our own 2-year program now that is paid. And although I don't like to use the word, it's not great. We're targeting So we're looking at diversity, we're looking at people from low socio-economic backgrounds, because I think action needs to be taken.
So in terms of access, I think it's really accessible. So I started my apprenticeship when I was about 21. So I wasn't your average sort of come out of school and know what I wanted to do. So for me, that was amazing that I could learn and earn. And actually my apprenticeship was paid really well as well. So that really encouraged me to take that role. And I think that what I said earlier about being able to live where I was working, I didn't have to travel to London to go and do a really useful events course while getting the experience. And I think especially in terms of access, being able to do what I was learning about was really important for me, because I'm dyslexic. So for me, sitting in front of a textbook all day, every day, doing the exams and things like that just really didn't suit my personality and my learning style. So to be able to go in and actually do the things I was learning about, I found was so much more beneficial and really suited me a lot better. So that was a really great avenue for me, and made me feel like, yeah, I could really get what I wanted out of it.
I think you made a really great point, especially when it comes to the idea of taking something that's in theory and making it practical. I think it goes back to what Arit was saying about needs and really being able to look at that. And Arit, you have your hand up. Please do speak.
I do, but I saw Nikki had her hand up before me, so she had like
Nikki,
this hand. Yeah. You didn't see it. It was just this hand like that. So yeah, please.
Thanks, Arit. I have to say, for anybody watching, I don't know how this is coming across to you, but I am in slow motion, as is everybody else. We're cutting in and out. So forgive me if I jump in or don't hear something. So the first thing I kind of really need to say is an apprenticeship is defined in law as a job with training. And so therefore, the fact that people are getting paid, because it's a paid job with training, does in itself make it more possible for people to take part. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and it touches on what Martha said, it's a different type of learning. It's a different type of progression. And I think that moves things on. If I go back to thinking about protected characteristics and diversity, there's a number of employers who I think have made a point of using apprenticeships to increase the diversity of their own workforce. And I think that is also to be hugely welcome. And from different apprenticeships across all the routes, I've heard some really fantastic stories about how different ways of doing assessment, different ways of passing, of qualifying, can really open up. It takes away a lot of anxiety for them if they're just showing what they can do, as opposed to writing essays or whatever it is for them. So I think there's lots of ways it does improve diversity. Apprenticeships do improve diversity. I don't think everything's perfect. I think there is still a journey to be gone on, and I think even those who've gone on a journey have still got further to go. So again, I think lots and lots of progress, lots of positivity there. As always, not yet perfect, I think is what I'd say.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nikki. And Arit.
Yeah, there was I was just, because this question seems to link to something that somebody put in the question and answer box, Ali Jaffery, forgive me if I mispronounced your surname, Ali, is, can you give any examples of using positive action in apprenticeships? And it's kind of picking up what Nikki just alluded to, is that we delivered and are actually about to go live on Wednesday next week with an apprenticeship scheme with the BPI. It's called the Brits Apprenticeship Scheme, and it was designed to help talent from diverse backgrounds, and that's right across the diversity spectrum, to do apprenticeships within the music industry. And that's now in its third year of running, and the BPI, they manage it, and their members apply to become host companies, and we do the recruitment, the onboarding, and the apprenticeship delivery. And I can't say, there's another scheme coming out next week that's to do a similar thing. And we've worked with music businesses like BMG. We set up a future talent scheme, which again was designed to improve diversity and was tailored around their diversity needs. So companies are using the apprenticeship model as a means to address kind of diversity needs within that or within their organization, or in the case of the BPI, within their sector where they have many members who will want to offer apprenticeships.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And what funny enough is what you're saying kind of leads on to the next question quite nicely is perception and communication are often seen as a challenge. How do we rebrand or communicate apprenticeships differently? If anyone would like to raise their hand first, and I can call on you.
Sorry, can you repeat that,
Sure.
Dianna?
Yeah, perception and communication are often seen as a challenge. How do we rebrand or communicate apprenticeships differently? Yes, Nikki. Well, we have Nikki, then Martha. I think there's a little bit of delay with Nikki. Nikki, are you okay there? What we'll do is we'll go on to Martha and then come back to Nikki. Martha?
So I think events like this are really important. I think to not only educate employers but employees, and I think as well the way that we talk to schools, I think, is really important. I think there was definitely, when I was at school, a bit of a narrative around apprenticeships, and had I have known I could have got what I needed to out of it, gosh, I would have done it a lot earlier than I did and saved myself a good few years of not knowing what I was doing and what I wanted to do. So I think that's really important. And also I think campaigns and really just pushing out how that experience is so vital. I have so many friends who have gone to university and expected to come out to a job, and actually often enough that isn't the case. Whereas in my case with my apprenticeship, I was promoted as soon as my apprenticeship finished, and I did another couple of years with Seven Arts, the company who I did it with, and then I've gone on to be deputy general manager of a theatre, which, gosh, 5 years ago I'd have laughed in your face and said absolutely not, that's not the journey that's going to happen, but it has, because of that, that amazing learning that you get from the experience you have. So yeah, I think the way that we talk about it, and also employers maybe really speaking up about the experience they've had, because I'd like to think that I was a big asset to the company. They could sort of mold me in a way that really fitted what they wanted out of me, but also I got to do so many different things that when members of staff left, I could then replace that because I'd been with the company for so long. So yeah, I think there's definitely a bit to be done with it in many ways.
Great, thank you so much. Nikki?
Thank you. Sorry about that. It is just absolutely freezing. Everything Martha says is...
Right, so we just lost Nikki. So what we'll do is we'll go to Arit and then Anthony.
I think I echo what Martha said. I think promoting things around a lot more around degree apprenticeships. I think promoting things because it kind of links to what's in the chat as well about having different faces coming into events on your marketing, so they reflect the wider population. So whether a person, as I said earlier, it's not just about new talent coming into the industry, it's also about people who are further on in their journey, in their career journey. So on the last iteration of the Brit scheme, for example, we had an apprentice who was 48 and he wanted to change careers. So being able to speak to, it's in the same way you would do any other form of marketing. It's about being able to speak in a language that people understand and can see themselves recognize. I think employers can help to change perception within their organizations by offering, up the apprenticeship as a professional development model, and you can call it whatever you want internally, even though the structure will remain the same. You can rebrand that according to your organization as a talent development program, and really encouraging people at all levels to engage will help change the perception.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And Anthony?
From a perception perspective, I think we do really well. I think specifically in relation to dance and what we offer, the word's out, and we spread it through our networks, but dancers between them have this whole ecosystem, and the word gets pushed to all sorts of countries. So we do get applicants from all over the place. I was speaking to someone in Hong Kong this morning that may be about to join us. However, in preparing for this event, I did a little search online, which was which dance companies offer paid apprenticeships in the UK. And a directory of apprenticeships came up. There was only one listed as a paid one, and that wasn't us. So obviously there's work to do about communicating it wider, because I think there's going to be a whole lot of people that just have zero awareness of it as a potential route for them. I don't have any answers to that right now, but in becoming more aware of that, I can see that there's, quite a bit of urgency, there's some work to do for communication.
Yes, thank you so much. And I have one question for you, Anthony, and hopefully you can answer, because one of the things I've noticed is that even with recruitment, when it comes to jobs, many organizations say they really struggle to recruit people who are Black and brown and people of color from that background. When it comes to that, especially with the company that you are a director of, have you found that when it comes to apprentice? And after you answer, if anyone else like to answer that question when it comes to recruitment, that would be really great.
Yeah, we've found that for years and years and years, and nothing much is changing. So I also teach in a lot of institutes and universities and conservatoires, and they're not very diverse, really. And we've found repeatedly that the people that come to us are from a similar demographic. So something's not working somewhere, and I think maybe it's even further back than that. You know, before even the Centre for Advanced Training Programs that feed into who goes into the universities. I think we need to rewind way further back and take some action elsewhere.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Would anyone else like to answer the question? Arit, would you have any thoughts on the question I just asked Anthony?
In terms of getting people from more racially diverse groups into job roles, I think the mistake that people sometimes make is they start the recruitment from when the opportunity goes live. It starts way before that. Like, who are you going to speak to? Which organizations are you connected to from who represent these communities? Like, you have to fish where the fish are, and you have to do that outreach work throughout the year. It's not just, oh, I've got a job now, I put it out there, I put it on this network, I put it on that, and I sent it to this person and said, oh, can you send this out to your network? Well, no, sometimes it doesn't work like that, because if we want to encourage people from different demographics to apply, then we look at who are the stakeholders in that, who are speaking to those demographics, and we make friends with them. We go and we deliver events, we offer we might do like little career surgeries every now and then. If they're hosting an event, if there's a body in the office who can go, then we go to churches, we go to mosques, we go wherever there's a career event that's happening. So you have to be very proactive and not expect that because I've advertised this time that the people didn't come. Well, where did you advertise? What was in the language? What was in your images? What did you offer different forms of way for people to apply? Or was it, there's lots of things that happen before you publish your job description. There's a chink in the chain before that. So I think that's the mistake that I see that companies generally make, is they just put an ad out and say, well, no one applied. You're tracking your data, or people applying, but they're not being shortlisted through to interview. So do you collect that data from all applicants and look at what the percentage is from those who are invited to those who might drop out, to those who eventually are seated in front of you? Do you track that? Do you track where you're getting the applications from, like to see which portals are working and which ones are not? Because if you're not looking at, you're not capturing information, you're not being intentional about building relationships, then you're just repeating the same cycle over and over again, and gonna say, oh, but your people didn't apply. Well, they might not have seen the ad.
Yeah.
Did you come into a space that I'm in? Or I might have applied 100 times and been rejected because my name is not is not a traditional name, and then your biases meant that, you know, I didn't get through, so I gave up applying. It's like inviting people to your party and then telling them they can't come, and then wondering why they didn't come the second year. You know,
Yeah.
like, yeah, you have to be prepared to fish where the fish are and do it continuously.
I agree. I think you make such a valid point. It's almost like breaking down a barrier and this expectation of expecting people to apply just because you put it up, when really it's about meeting people where they're at and building that relationship. So by the time that does come out, you'll be able to get that pool of people that you're looking for to apply for that role, to kind of address some of the gaps that you may have in your organization when it comes to diversity and equality. Nikki, you have your hand up.
I do, and hopefully now I can be seen and heard better. I have moved, you're now balancing on top of the microwave. I would agree with everything that's been said. And I would add, there's something that I try and do. Well, I always make sure I do it, and I hope it does help. And I've got a really diverse team, made a point of getting it. And actually, for me, it's really important that when people come in to be interviewed with us and to meet us and to see us, that they can see themselves, so that they feel comfortable coming into our organisation. They know they'll be welcomed, and they can then give their best selves both in the interview and when they come in. So we really always try and have diverse, well, we always do have, but we make a point of making sure we have diverse recruitment panels.
Brilliant. Thank you so much all for your answers. I'll ask one or two more questions, and then what we'll do is that we'll turn it over to the audiences as they've been typing in questions, and then I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to get some of their questions answered. And so the next question I have for you is, funding is sparse in our sector right now. What do you think could be done differently to address this? Is there anything we might learn from other sectors when it comes to embedding apprenticeships more consistently? And so anyone could raise their hand to answer that, or I can ask the question again. Nikki.
I'll start off because I guess I have the benefit of working across a number of different sectors, and so seeing how things are done differently. So there are things that definitely can be learned, but there are also unique challenges, I would say, in this sector. So the things that can be learned are things like having a pool and a cohort of apprentices. But to do that, and there's something about scale and cost there, in terms of training and training costs. I think having numbers, having scale makes the individual costs cheaper, not for the individual apprentice, but for the employer to actually do that. And I think there's also things about having mentors at scale, having groups that work together and progress together and build in the same way that people kind of leaving. I always think of business schools, people leaving business schools leave with their group, with their people, with their network built in. There's something about that I think we could learn from other sectors. And I think there's things about having a routine, a cycle of recruiting apprentices and bringing them in and moving them through the company. And that's fine if your company is big enough. So I think in the case of creative and cultural sector, I think it's actually because it's a mosaic, isn't it, as opposed to one big unit. It's kind of how the organizations, individual organizations, can play together. And I don't mean play as in play, I mean can work together to be one team as with multiple units within it, I think, is where the trick is.
Great, thank you, Nikki. Arit?
I didn't understand the question, if I'm honest, because what are you saying, that when you say funding is sparse, then is the expectation that companies are looking to be funded to take on apprentices? Is that what the expectation comes from, or where that question comes from?
I did my own interpretation of it about the funding bands.
Oh, right.
So that's where
Oh,
I went. You might want to go somewhere else.
right. The funding bands. Yeah, the funding bands are sparse. For the delivery, they haven't increased with inflation. Yes, Nikki, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
But maybe that's an offline chat. But yeah, I read it as in I needed funding to take on an apprentice. So maybe if the person is in the room, if that's what they are saying, then I sometimes I struggle with that, if I'm honest, because on the one hand, if you think about the definition that Nikki gave about what an apprenticeship is, right? It's it's a form of talent development. So, and it's not just about new entrants, it's about existing staff too. So you're paying your existing staff anyway. So you're just putting them on an apprenticeship program. And if you're a small company, you can get that cost to deliver covered by a larger levy transfer. So there's a mechanism in place to support your existing staff. If you're talking about funding to, say, for example, you want funding to diversify your workforce, I have a challenge with paying people to become diverse. I think it should just be something that we do organically, and primarily because where that payment for human labor comes from and stems from is why I have a problem with it. So I just didn't really understand the way, if it was just I need to take on new talent and I need to be funded.
It's more
I
about
wasn't quite sure.
It's more about the funding of employers to take on apprenticeships and how to shift that forward. Because sometimes with arts organizations, they have to apply for funding in order to take an apprentice. And so
Right.
competitiveness of that, how can they further address that within the sector?
I guess it comes, I know it has stimulated people. There's a pros and cons to it, because there was a while back, there was what's it called? Creative Employment Fund. I think it was called Creative Employment Fund, something like that, that CC Skills ran, and basically companies got a grant. The salaries were part funded or something like that to take on apprentices, and it did certainly stimulate the market. And schemes like the Kickstart scheme, for example, were also schemes that enabled employers to take on. In that sense, it was young people. Same with CC Skills, it was about young people from a range of diverse backgrounds. What happens after that is that a lot of the time the people don't move into full-time employment because I'm not being paid to keep this person on. So the progression route for the individual does not necessarily also, mean that they're given a full-time job. So yes, they've had a year's worth of employment, but they drop off at the end. But like I said earlier, I'm just not really, it's uncomfortable sometimes for me to think about paying companies to diversify their organization.
Great, thank you. Would anyone else like to answer? Anthony, would you have any thoughts?
I was just thinking about the drop-off and organizations not having the capacity to employ people at the end of it. And in relation to that, I was just thinking, thankfully we're bringing people to a place so far where they all have had employment. But what I'm also interested in is the number of companies is very small. The number of people trying to get those roles is enormous. So it's how do we build the skills and the confidence for people to be able to go, do you know what? I'm going to do that. What you guys have done, I'm going to go for it. And now I know the starting points, and I know I've got an ongoing relationship where I can ask for more input and guidance along the way. So I make sure with all of our guys that they're always on the phone to me and emailing me, and I support what they're trying to do. And it's not about, doesn't have to be about my direct employment, although we have employed lots of people. It's about how they take the future forward.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Anthony. Before I move on to the audience questions, Martha, is there anything you would like to say in regards to what you've heard today?
No, I echo that, to be honest, Anthony. I think giving the support in order for, even if you can't offer a full-time employment, to connect people with the right people who they can go forward and gain employment in a different way. And actually, I think, especially with my apprenticeship, it didn't just develop me professionally, it developed me personally as well. The confidence I gained and the knowledge I had, I felt like I could really go out into sort of the same sector, but in a different, from events, outdoor events to theatre. It's a very different sort of game, but I felt like I had all of that knowledge and all of those transferable skills and the confidence to go, do you know what, I can absolutely go and do that. Why can't I? So actually, it's about building, while you've got your apprenticeships, building them up to believe in their capabilities and what they can do going forward. And I think that was one of the biggest things for me, was actually, which shocked me, because I didn't sort of go into it thinking, I'm going to come out really confident in what I'm able to do and what I can go forward doing. And it really did paint a bigger picture for me there. And yeah, I think those transferable skills are absolutely vital, because gosh, I can use them in so many different things. So yeah, sort of echo what everyone said.
Brilliant, thank you. And lastly for this question, Nikki.
Thank you. I'd be remiss of me not to mention that we've got a couple of initiatives. We, the Department of Education, actually have got a couple of initiatives that want to try and help in this space, recognising that in this sector in particular, and in construction, it could be tricky for one employer to commit to taking somebody on for an entire year. That can be a little bit challenging here. So the Flexi apprenticeship programme, which includes portable apprenticeships as well as flexible apprenticeships, has been designed to try and rectify that, I guess is the best way I could put it. My team are doing a webinar with DFE on Tuesday. If anybody wants any more information on that, I can give the details to Hannah, who can push that out. So if people want to find out a little bit more, that would be handy. But it's back recognising that this is a sector where, as Anthony said, there are many people looking for jobs in very small micro industries. And with Arit entirely, people should be paid, and you shouldn't be paid to diversify your workforce. That should be something that's coming from within, absolutely. But there are ways of making it easier for people to take on apprenticeships or apprentices to help in all areas. So yeah, that's what I would add there. Of pay, if I think about across the wider routes, I think sometimes pay in this sector, and this isn't going to come as a surprise to anybody on this call, and for those who don't know, I did work in the sector for a long time. I'm not going to say how long. And pay in this sector is quite different, I would say, to some of the other sectors where apprentices generally are taken on and progress and thrive. And we have that problem no matter whether it's an apprentice or an employee, I think.
I think what you say leads on nicely to the next question that we have, for example, from Sebastian Barnes, who asks, how can we ensure employers pay apprentice a reasonable wage rather than the minimum for first year, often less than living wage? Martha.
So I think that's to do with the narrative. I think employers have got to see what their employees are bringing to the table. I know that you've got to train them, but actually I was really willing to learn. I was there every day. I wanted the challenges. I wanted to learn as much as I could within that time period, because I knew that was going to arm me going forward. And actually that meant that I could get that promotion and fill a position that they would have brought someone new into the company, whereas I already knew the company. I'd worked for them for just over a year, and I'd really thrived in that environment. So I think it is the narrative on looking at what they're bringing. I really think that I was a really valuable employee. I worked really hard and I picked it up, from contract writing to event managing. I took every challenge as much as a normal employee would take. So actually paying less I don't think really gives you anything, because you're just demotivating people and making them feel like they're not appreciated. Whereas if you pay them right, people will put their all in and they will feel that appreciation. And at the end of the day, they will put that 110% in. And I must admit, I was really lucky with my apprenticeship that my employer could see that from the get-go, and I was paid a really good wage for what I was expecting, which is partly why I was able to take that. But I think that's definitely a position that most companies should look at taking, because, you know, you can really foster a brilliant work environment and employee from starting at an apprenticeship level and taking them through. So it's about looking at what you're getting for that money, I suppose. But yeah, that would be my input on that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Martha, so much. Arit.
Yeah, I think the apprentice minimum wage should be scrapped, if I'm honest. I think it's a distraction, and I think it flies in the face of diversity, because it's like, you know, you've got people, especially when talking about social mobility, it just narrows your talent pool to those people who can afford to stay at home and maybe have parents, carers, or family members who can supplement them whilst they are doing their apprenticeship. So we didn't work with employers. We made a decision internally because of that we would ask employers to either pay the London living wage or the national minimum wage, or somewhere in between. I mean, now we're seeing a lot of employers who are readdressing, maybe primarily, I think, because of the cost of living crisis, who are, and also just diversity and inclusion, and making sure that their employees, which effectively is what an apprentice is in an organisation, are not stressing so much about money that they're now detracted from doing their apprenticeship and showing up fully at work. So they're lucky, and we're seeing a real trend in our employers who are re-looking at their entry-level salaries and taking them much closer to the London living wage or the national living wage, because I know the two are different. I think one is £11 something and the other is £10. Anyway, let me not quote them because I'm misquoting. But yeah, I'll see in that. But I just think the apprentice national minimum wage is a bit of a distraction, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for asking that question, because answering that, because I think a few audience members actually had that idea, like, should we scrap it? And I think you answered that greatly. Thank you so much. One of the questions that I have here is from Tim Gardner. He says, as a specialist provider, he finds it really difficult to speak to the right people or to get them to engage in conversation. Not enough support and thought regarding workforce planning and skills gap. We need people to think differently. Can we embed them in funding bids and thinking about the future rather than now? You can answer. Is that questions for anyone to answer?
So this is the right people within the organizations to engage. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a business development question when you're trying to find those employers to offer apprenticeships. I mean, I guess there's varied ways. I guess for us, we were quite unique in that we were very sector focused. So I think engaging in things like this is how the right people found me, if you want. Partnering with creative and cultural skills, we worked with creative and cultural skills on like the creative employment program, screen skills on a variety of initiatives that they delivered. So we had a seat at the table where we were speaking to employers, but also I think as an apprenticeship provider, the conversation, at least for me, was not just about the apprenticeship. It's about more, okay, so we're a talent development partner. Apprenticeships is one way that we can do that. But in terms of our business model, it's about talent development. So we've got the apprenticeship side, but we also do standalone training. So I want to know what your strategy is. So you're having a different conversation than just, this isn't about an apprenticeship relationship. It's not transactional. It's more thinking much more holistically about talent development, how that feeds into their DE&I strategy. Sometimes they didn't have one, so we would help them deliver that. So it becomes a bigger question than one that's more, like for me anyway, was more transactional, because I was more interested in the bigger picture and where potentially we could add value and get paid.
Thank
put
you.
food on our families' tables. Yeah.
Absolutely, and pay your bills. That's
Yeah.
also really important.
Yeah.
Nikki, I will be really interested in your thoughts on this question.
So I'm going to go slightly differently to I'm going to go in a different direction and I think she's right actually, but I'm going to throw in something else, which is around when I heard the question, I immediately thought, ooh, which people and which table? And I guess I was like, and then I thought about, okay, so what could we offer? What could we at the Institute offer if it is getting people around the table? And we do a lot of stuff speaking. Our sole remit is to speak to employers. Our remit is to speak to employers and make sure they have products they value. We know in this sector, we've done a lot of analysis and looking at actually getting training providers. We don't have as many training providers offering in this sector as in other sectors. And there's a whole myriad of reasons that we've touched on for that. If there is anything, if it's that table you're looking at, if it's a sort of apprenticeship government structural sort of table thing, then give us a shout is the best thing I can say. And I'll put you in touch with Christie on the team who's doing some work around trying to marry up training providers with the apprenticeship standards. So slightly different take. Both are, different ends of the same spectrum, I guess.
Yeah, I would just add to that actually, Nikki, because you're right. Because in the days of what were they called? The SFA, remember them? They used to have a team, an employer engagement team, that would speak to employers and then refer them to providers, or if an employer was going, like a broadcaster wanted to take on a new provider, they'd do that matchmaking, and you, along with whoever other providers, would go and speak to that employer. So that service doesn't exist in the way that it used to, but I mean, if you've got something at the Institute, that can really help. But I think it also comes down as well, when you're thinking about the right person, is the size of the business. So if it's a larger organization, it's often, if they've got a learning and development manager, often sits with them, or it sits with the HR director. I also made a lot of friends with HR consultants who were working with smaller organizations, because they can introduce you to the right people within those companies as well. But if it's a smaller company, it's usually either the PA to the managing director or co-founder who will have those initial conversations and then cascade that up. Brilliant. I found it helpful anyway. I hope that helps whoever asked.
Yeah, and just for the sake of managing expectations, Diana, we can't do the same job that ESFA used to do. But I've got a team who's really, really committed in this sector, who are kind of going above and beyond in terms of what our remit is. So we're kind of edging outside of our little box to try and help, and that's what we would do. Not that we can take on everything.
Of course. And what's funny is that you both answered a few questions, actually, because a few people had the exact same amount of questions in regards to that. So thank you both so much. But there's a question here that I found quite interesting that I would like to ask, if you don't mind. And the question is, how does the panel think we can get past the perception that apprenticeships are only for the young? And is there an argument for midlife and older adult apprenticeships post-pandemic? And if so, how could they work? Yes, Nikki.
Too many buttons trying to my hand at the same time. So I think the sort of statistics would indicate apprenticeships are most definitely not just for the young, is the first thing. And it depends what young is, what you define as young, because what's young to me, I suspect, will be quite different to what's young to somebody else. Pretty much everybody is young in my eyes. So there's that. And I think there's a load of, there's quite a case study to be had about what bringing on an older, somebody who's not young in the workforce, whether you're bringing them into your company or you're moving them on in your company, what that does for the individual. And we all have different stages in our lives when we can step forward and take things on more than we maybe could at other times. And, we all progress, we all take steps up at different stages. How that works both for the individual, but also for the organisation. So if you've got somebody who's been in a role for a number of years, absolutely love your organisation, as many organisations in the creative and cultural sector do, what happens if you move that person into a slightly different role and you give them the training to do something they've maybe always wanted to do, or maybe just something your company, we've all changed, everything, the way we do everything has changed during COVID and will change further. So people need to change, organisations need to change. How do you use apprenticeships to enhance your current workforce and all of your current workforce and move that on, I think, is where I'd go there. But definitely stats would show not just young people.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I actually, my brother, literally, he's not as young, and he literally just finished an apprenticeship and was able to move on. He's literally entering into his 30s. So people are thinking about where they see themselves going. And I think it's quite amazing that people, regardless of what age, are saying, let me just start here and continue to build up.
Yeah.
And
and Diana, just to say, when I started at the Institute, the apprenticeship panel, we were a panel of apprentices, the most inspiring member of that was well into her late 50s. And she was on her apprenticeship at that time. I hope I've got her age right. Anyway, she was definitely in that sort of bracket.
Yeah.
What was she not Nicole? Next research, she was only 42. But I think, absolutely anyone, because we all have different things going on in our lives.
Yeah.
That we can move at different times.
Absolutely. I totally agree, Nikki. And it comes to what I said earlier, like about employers as well, like changing the narrative internally when they're thinking about apprenticeships and thinking about longer term planning. And because that's one of the most common questions that I get when talking about apprenticeships, and it's like, yeah, but it's for your existing staff too. And it's like, oh, we didn't realize, oh, okay, so you've got people in the business who are paying to do their AAT, was it that a qualification that you need to be an accountant, but you have got established providers who deliver those qualifications, so that when you're thinking about staff retention, to be able to take that away from your employee who's paying for this training in order to be better at their job, but they've also got loads of other expenses in this current climate that we're in, to be able to take that expense away from them and use your levy or a levy transfer can help with staff retention. Even with law, do you know what I mean? You can do legal apprenticeships. So right across the spectrum, it's about maybe the institute, maybe the, what do you call them? The funding, the SFA, like in your marketing and in your explain and thinking about much more broader about how do we communicate to individuals. So when you're sitting in your torturous performance review, or if you're lucky enough to be in an organisation where you have informal career conversations that are slightly more relaxed, then you bring this up like, oh, I learned that I could do this programme. Is it possible? Can we talk about me doing this apprenticeship? So empowering people to have those conversations with their line manager as well.
Thank you so much.
I think that's so important.
I agree with you. We're soon drawing to a close, but Martha, I would like to reel you in because I think your experience here is really important. And so I have time for 2 questions for you.
Okay.
The first question I have for you is about mentorship. Throughout your apprenticeship, how important has it been to have a mentor in order to kind of navigate your apprenticeship and being able to engage with that? How has that been for you?
So I was really lucky, actually, in my position. I had probably a handful of mentors. It wasn't just one person. I worked with so many, because we bring in freelancers a lot. So I get to work with so many different people throughout my apprenticeship, which all brought different skills, opinions, advice to the table. And that was so useful because you could, as an individual, you can sit there and you can tailor what you want to take away from that, what you think suits the industry you're going into, what suits you as a person. So I found my position really useful because, as well, within the wider context of the company, you do come across a lot of people in a lot of different roles. So Claire in finance to, even the CEO, you get a real great understanding of a number of different roles within a company, but also you get to sort of learn off each of them. And I think that was really, really useful for me, especially going forward and not being in the same sort of role in events. Going into theatre, I found working with all those different people really, really useful. But I had, a number of different line managers, from a festivals director to a senior producer. And actually, at the time, probably I was thinking, oh, I've got a new line manager. But actually, when I look back on it now, it was so beneficial, because I got so many different people to work with and different bits of advice and things that I could take away. So yeah, I think it's really useful. And again, that's another thing why I'd sing the praises of apprenticeships, because you do get to meet and work with so many different people who will influence your career.
Brilliant, thank you. And the last question I have for you, Martha, is when it comes to apprenticeship, obviously there's assignments that you have to do with the training body, but then also you have your workload with your actual employer. How have you found balancing that and making sure you've been able to get your assignments done while also getting the tasks done at work as well?
So to be honest, it was better than I expected it was going to be. I think because throughout school and when you look at university and things, assignments can be really, really heavy. And actually, I found the assignments were work-based. So I was almost, obviously you've got to write the assignments, but I was almost like ticking them off while I was doing my day job, which I found really, really great. And I loved the fact that my assignments were based on what I was doing at work. So my last assignment, I did a band tour, and I could sort of pick that and tailor that to pass my assignment, but also I really enjoyed it. I was really enjoying doing my assignments. I've still got a folder of them all now. I'm not going to get rid of them. I look back at them sometimes if I need a bit of like something to give me a bit of inspiration, or I go back to them because a lot of work goes into them, but actually I really enjoyed them. They were very different to what I think I'd built up in my head. And yeah, I've definitely carried that through my career so far, and will do for the rest. But yeah, I found the balancing fairly easy, for want of a better word, and actually really enjoyed the time I got to spend. And I was really lucky that my employer, we put aside some time every other week where I could really sit and go through my assignments. So I think that really helped balance. But yeah, I did enjoy it, which makes a massive difference.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We're having to draw to a close as we have 5 more minutes before this webinar ends. And so we have one more question, just one final quick shoot answer, and hopefully we'll have Nikki who'll come back in. We're having Anthony who's just about to come back in. Oh, brilliant. And so the final question we have is, if you had a magic wand, what one thing would you want to see change when it comes to developing apprenticeships for the creative and cultural industries?
I'd say narrative. I'd like the narrative to change. I think it goes back to so many points we've just discussed, and narrative can sort of be branding as well. I think that's really important. I think when we were talking about the age of apprenticeships, to being able to do an apprenticeship in a workplace you already work in, I think all of that, I think the narrative around that would needs to change. And when it does, I think that's when we'll start to see apprenticeships thrive even more than they already are.
Thank you.
I would say I can only have one.
Yeah, one. We have like 4 minutes, 3. So I have to wrap up.
I would say flexibility. Yeah, and I say flexibility because it covers lots of things. So I would be flexibility as in, so you can be slightly more responsive to those smaller employers who expand and contract depending on their business cycle. So if you're theatre, do you know what I mean? Or you're working in film, whatever, that you can expand and contract. The flexibility would come also in how people can use their apprenticeship levy, like those larger, I know we've got some flexi apprenticeships, but those larger companies who can maybe use it to cover more bite-size training for existing employees. I'd like that flexibility would apply to that too. And no, I'm pushing it. And flexibility in terms of the structure as well. So yes, you've got this 20%, but much more flexibility in how that can be delivered, I would like. So flexibility through all of it.
Thank you. And Nikki, quickly.
I'm going complete magic wand territory here. So in that context, I would like scale. And I would like scale because I think if we had scale, it would lead to more awareness. And that would lead to more awareness in terms of apprentices and employers. And then we get that virtuous circle. We get more mentors in. And when I think of the number of young people, and not so young people, who go through sort of creative and cultural university courses, that's significant scale. And then I see the number we have going through apprenticeships, and that's tiny, tiny little. And so I'd like to kind of not take people away from going to university, because that's a great experience as well, but to try and get some balance there. So I think more is what I want, more apprentices in the creative and cultural sector. That's, yeah, so it's definitely scale.
Scale, great, thank you so much. Brilliant. So as we start to draw to a close, I just want to let people know who hadn't had their questions answered, they will be taken offline and they will be answered across their social media channels or individually. And thank you so much for all who have put forward a question. I will also like to thank the panel, Martha, Arit, Nikki, and Anthony, who's unfortunately had technical issues, but thank you so much for joining us today. I'd also like to thank the BLS interpreters, Christie and Leah. Thank you so much for your signing, and hopefully we weren't speaking too fast for you. So thank you. Also, I want to let everyone know that there is a recording of the session that will be available and sent around to those attending the event, as well to those who couldn't make it, and also be made very aware that this conversation doesn't just stop here. It also continues offline as well, and is also continuing on social media as stated, so on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So please do look on all social media channels for a continuation of this conversation. And also, I would like to thank CC Skills for hosting. Thank you so much for Holly and Hannah for putting this together. It's been a real pleasure working with you and everyone involved. And that is it for today's event. So thank you to all the audience for watching, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.